to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item C, approval of minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the May 28th, 2024 NFP meeting?
So moved.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, item D, public comments. If there are any comments from the public, please come forward, state your name, and you'll have 3 minutes to address the board. Please note this is a general public comment period. There will be separate public comment periods for the action items under new business. All right, I'm not seeing anybody step up. Jamie, do we have any callers on the phone?
No callers at this time.
All right. Item E, board member comments. Are there any comments from the board?
I'll just make the comment that for new business item 1, as the applicant, I'll be abstaining from board member discussion or voting for that item.
All right, thank you. Anything else from board? All right. Moving on to item F, new business. First up, we have the approval of the NFP site plan for 3401 Nazareth Road project conditioned upon approval by the Site Plan Review Committee. Nolan, can you provide an overview of the case for the staff report?
Yes. So this project was before the board for a recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals at that May meeting. The applicant, the Southwest Michigan Land Conservancy went over the project with the board and kind of the progress they were making towards full site plan approval. So they're fully within that process. So this is the project coming back to the board. And as it stands right now, this is for, looking for approval from the NFP board so they can keep moving through the site plan review process. Since that May meeting, there was a woodland delineation completed by the applicant, which at the May meeting, was discussed around the boardwalk and potential impacts to trees on the edge of what would be considered woodland in their critical root zones. Right now the project is, moving through the process. It was approved by the Zoning Board of Appeals for the variance to NFB. So that is kind of the general overview status of the project.
Cool. Thank you. Would the applicant please step to the podium and present on the project?
Do you have that visual, or do you want me to report in abstract?
Yeah, you can start now.
Better? Okay. I'll just get started here while waiting for visuals to come up. So I'm Mitch Leto, Stewardship Director at the Southwest Michigan Land Conservancy. At our previous NFP meeting, we began the application process with the NFP board, again with the Bow in the Clouds Trail Development Project, that we were requesting a variance to slope and slope setbacks for development of an access easement for the city public services to service the sewer network that runs through the property, as well as to create universal access for the community.
if you have it up here, you can just plug in.
Wasn't sure if it would talk as well. All right, everybody see that okay? Great, so we had moved through the slope conversation about the slope, stabilizing the slope and the different details of access, and the remaining piece that hadn't been presented to the board was the woodland delineation. So with the two kind of pathways, either for tree protection standard or for woodland protection standard, we were identifying that this site fits in a woodland protection standard. So you can see here's the site outlined in pink as the parcel boundaries itself. That dotted black and white line is the township city limits, township to the north, city to the south. And the green area are what we did a desktop GIS delineation with some ground truthing to determine that green area as woodland on the parcel that shows us falling into that category of 50 to 75% woodland of the parent parcel, whether you count the township or just the city. And so from a desktop perspective, that is what dictated falling into the woodland category. And then the other question was that we wanted to follow up on was related to specifically this area. So you can see that dotted black and white line again on the north side of the property. The previous tree count and number estimates had been in the township area, so requested some further detail on that. So this orange polygon here is a little over an acre. I think it's 1.4 acres, and is within the city. The trail system that is going to be widened basically to facilitate city movement and facilitate people movement through the site is outlined there in pink, and just that southern portion of that will be part of the expanded trail system for this section. So we kind of outlined this area as where the project would impact the woodland potentially, and use this as kind of a representative portion of the woodland on the rest of the preserve, given that there's around 36 acres of woodland. We use this smaller area as representative and directly related to the project itself. The red area I want to point out is an option depending on how our contractor bids come in. We may include that in the trail development as well, but doesn't really change the overall outcome of as far as the impacts being within the NFP site requirements. So the NFP, as far as woodland determination goes, has kind of three portions that it talks about: minimum area, tree count or density, and the natural ground cover. And so this report goes into detail about how the site clearly meets all of those. There's 34 acres of woodland, the minimum being half acre, so clearly meeting that. Falling in either 59 or 52% woodland coverage, depending on if you consider just the city, the parent parcel, or the township acreage included. Individually counting any trees that are over 50 feet at maturity, 2 inches diameter or greater, that are within the city limits in those project areas. We had 275 trees representing 17 species. And yeah, the survey area was 1.4 acres. So our density was 191 trees per acre, and I believe the NFP woodland designation requirements are around 40. So it's obviously exceeds that. Natural ground cover, it's not a mowed turf area, so photo there to kind of give you a representative idea of what the woodland looks like. And then given where we fall in that table, basically per NFP allowances, we could remove up to 50% or 13 acres of woodland. Obviously our goal is to do the opposite of that, So we're sort of estimating, depending on the project and the excavation and sort of moving the trail system through the site, we anticipate just a handful of trees, probably maybe 2 or 3, but maybe as many as a dozen, depending on if we have that additional trail element added there. But we're talking about individual trees within that allowance of 13 acres. So just wanting to do our due diligence to show the impact that we might have here. So I think that's it. And then the last part is just basically a detailed inventory of what those trees are, which are a mix of mostly native, but some non-native trees as well of varying sizes. Yeah, any questions while I'm up here?
Yeah, the trees that you might remove, do you know which ones they are at this point?
I believe there's a small black oak, and part of the reason we remove that one is because we're jogging the trail kind of away from the wetland to try to thread the gap between a large white pine and a large red oak. So we're kind of playing preference to native species or species that are of larger size in that city area. So would be within kind of this portion. So, we'll work with the contractor, but we think that we'll be able to kind of thread the gap between some of these trees to get to our next connection point down here. And to reiterate, we're using mostly the existing trail, but hoping to kind of improve it, create some more wetland buffer and avoid those big trees. Any other questions? Okay.
I did want to clarify too, for anyone listening or just for board members, the woodland standard and the protected tree standard can be applied simultaneously on the site, but not usually at this, for the same stand of trees. Protected tree standard usually is for smaller stands of trees that aren't meeting the woodland criteria, which is possible on some sites. But in this case, this is such a large woodland area, and given some of the potential impacts to individual trees, there's latitude for the work to still be completed, but still applying the woodland, standard. So as long as they're within that preservation percentage. Yep.
Can you remind me of the acreage of that yellow polygon or orange polygon?
1.44.
1.4, okay.
And so that was to determine basically number of trees divided by area gave us our density to kind of go back to that woodland definition and see how we fit in there.
All right. Thanks, Mitch. Are there any comments from the public related to this item?
Should I leave this up or?
All right. Not seeing anybody step up here in person. Jamie, are there any call-in comments?
Doesn't look like we have any on the phone at this time.
All right. Can I entertain a motion to approve the NFP site plan for 3401 Nazareth Road project conditioned upon approval by the Site Plan Review Committee?
So moved.
Second?
All right, this one will need a roll call. Nolan?
Fuller?
Yes.
Bassett?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes. All right, motion passes.
Sorry, Leto is abstain.
Abstain.
Yeah.
Correct. Cool. All right. On to item 2, approval of the NFP site plan for 3625 West Michigan project, conditioned upon approval by the Site Plan Review Committee and adherence to the NFP variance conditions. Nolan, can you provide an overview of the case?
Sure. Yep. So this project is located along West Michigan Avenue in Kalamazoo in the Knollwood neighborhood. It's a redevelopment of a site to add multifamily housing. It was previously before the NFP board for some variances to the NFP. Those were a variance to encroach into some protected slopes and slope setbacks, and then a variance from the woodland standard to remove 71.7% of the woodlands. So after that initial approval for the variances, the project went through a period of time where site plan had to get adjusted slightly, and now they are going through the process again and looking for approval of their NFP site plan as they go through the site plan review process.
All right, thanks, Nolan. Would the applicant please step to the podium and present on the project?
Good afternoon, Jason with AR Engineering. Thanks for having us. As Nolan mentioned, we were before you for a variance for percentage of woodland removal. The exhibit that is pulled up on the screen right now was an exhibit that was provided back at that time. So the limits hasn't changed from what we had asked. We are not seeking any additional impacts, encroachments. We adjusted the site plan with the city engineering and other city planning members to account for what we obtained, the variance that we obtained from your board. If you can go to probably the landscape color plan. So this kind of shows the layout. That the red line at the far south was the limits that was approved at the previous meeting. You can see that we're maintaining that from a disturbance standpoint. We've got the storm basin that sits at the south. If you recall, there is a slope that goes down towards the railroad tracks there. So the storm basin makes sense to fit in the back of the site. One of the things that we had spoke about at the variance meeting was what we would do on that slope stabilization. And so we're working with city engineering to put the best approach in there. They obviously have some concerns with the slope, so we're working with them to put that best, but it's going to be restored as a native seed, which is what we call out on our landscape plan. We also talked about trying to create some additional buffering with trees to that south. With the basin there, there's trees. The woodland continues obviously to the south and the east of the basin, as well as just to the west. So we've planted quite a significant number of trees just to the north on the south side of the proposed parking lot. And we went through review with the city planning department on the plantings, and everything was we provide slightly more than what's required from a proposed planting standpoint. There's a few shrubs that we have to add up near the front, but I believe it's like 3 or 4. So we're working with them to add those additional shrubs. If you pan up towards the north section, you can see the buffering up along the road that's added with some shrub plantings and some additional trees. If you want to go to the existing conditions demo. So this kind of shows the existing site. As mentioned, there's the existing structure that's out there along with pavement. That's all going to be removed as part of the development, and the site will be reworked to maintain those limits. The orange line at the south end is approximately the parking lot limits, just for perspective. And then the basin sits just north of that, kind of that red line that runs east-west. The other red boxes and green boxes were just shown just for species and types of trees and sizes of trees in those areas. Obviously, to the north of that line, which was part of the variance that we obtained, those trees are being removed as part of the development. I don't know if there's any specific questions on the site plan itself. We did have a meeting with all the city departments a few weeks back, about 3 weeks back, to talk through a lot of the questions and comments that came through that meeting were from fire that we need to work through, mainly related to building access, fire department connections, a few other things that go along with a multifamily type of development or an apartment type development. Most of the others with engineering and with some of the other departments were pretty minimal. So we're just working through those last little loose ends with them. But from a layout standpoint, nothing's really going to be adjusted from what's presented before you.
All right. I'm going to hold you for a second. Are there any comments from the public related to this item? All right, not seeing anybody step up in person. Jamie, any call-in comments?
No callers.
All right. Board member comments.
Yeah, thanks for the review and presentation. I was wondering if you could just provide a little more context for the rest of us. The existing building is what was on site when the parcel was purchased, and has there been some infrastructure development and demolition happened and you're seeking to basically finish the process then, or as far as the project phase as it stands right now?
Sure. I've got Greg with the owner's team. He can probably chime in.
Hi, everybody. Just want to introduce myself, Greg Delaney. The property was purchased for a senior living facility. When that business was terminated, the building was heavily vandalized during that time period. We're at about, the fire chief calls me, I don't know, once, maybe twice a month. I think we're responsible for maybe 50 calls since the beginning of the year. So we're eagerly awaiting getting all of these approvals so we can proceed with demolition. As it sits right now, the only demolition that's been done has been by others.
Thank you. And just, I believe you mentioned it, but just to verify, so the clearing limits and the level of variant, or I guess the variance is requested regardless, but the amount of acreage for tree removal, none of that's changed, right? Just going back through the process again, just given the time elapsed.
Yeah, absolutely nothing has changed from previous approvals.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can add a little more context too. There were some discussions with city staff about potentially accessing some utilities further to the south on that site, closer to that southern edge. So there was some discussions potentially around an access road. However, that would have required coming back to adjust the variances because there would have been more disturbed areas. But as shown, that doesn't need to happen on this site. So the variances haven't changed. The scope of those variances haven't changed at all.
Yeah, there's a pretty dramatic grade change from the road to the rear rail. It's 60 feet. So I think it'd be a pretty difficult access through our site. Any other questions?
I have a question more for Nolan. Do variances expire? Like, it's been a couple years. Is there or do they?
I can answer that. We were in close conversation. As long as we're still within plan approval. This has changed a couple times during that period, but we had 12 months to then from approval to submit for our site plan approval. We did. I think it was at month 11 and a half. And then now we're within site plan approval, which is still live during that period.
Yeah, so there is an expiration. If they start the process prior to that expiration, they're okay. Yep.
Yeah. And I just wanted to be clear too. So yes, they're not here for that variance request, right? That was done, still active. You have 12 months as long as you have some sort of piece of that process still moving forward. If you've pulled a permit, if there's something active on the site within that 12 months, that variance is still active. All the materials they have in front of you today that they've been working with the city is all toward that second piece, which is site plan approval. So once they get this approval, once they get the second approval through your board, that'll allow them to get then building review done, and then they can start pulling permits and then start groundbreaking. So.
Great, thank you for that clarification.
All right, any more board comments? All right, can I entertain a motion to approve the NFP site plan for the 3625 West Michigan project conditioned upon approval by the Site Plan Review Committee and adherence to the NFP variance conditions?
So moved.
Support.
All right, this one will need a roll call. Nolan, will you please call roll?
Leto?
Yes.
Bassett?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Fuller?
Yes.
All right, motion passes.
Thank you all for your time today. Look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you. All right, on to item 3 under new business. Approval of recommendation to the City Commission for the reappointment of Laura Fredrickson to the NFP board for a full term of 2 years. Nolan, can you provide some background on this?
Yes. So previously, we had one board member who was terming off, Bobby Glasser. It was discovered, though, that Laura Fredrickson's partial term that she took from former member Paul McNallis had expired in March as well. So upon that discovery, spoke with Director Fredrickson, and they expressed interest in continuing to do a complete second term. So, that's good because that adheres to the board makeup. So looking at having folks from the development world as well as the ecological, biological, geological backgrounds. So, so that's essentially it. It was, term expired in March, but until a replacement or a renewal of the term, there's still an active board member. So.
All right. Any discussion or comments from board members in regards to that?
Laura's not here to hear this, but I just appreciated her contributions to the board. She seems to have a really great attention to detail and brings kind of a niche to the board from the development world, from landscape architecture, and things that I wouldn't have thought to ask. So I really appreciated her perspective over her short time here.
Yeah, I agree. I think she's been an asset to the board for sure. All right, can I entertain a motion to approve a recommendation to the City Commission for the appointment of Laura Fredrickson to the NFP board for a full term of 2 years?
So moved.
Support?
All right. Nolan, do we need a roll call for this?
Yes.
Okay.
Martin?
Yes.
Bassett?
Yes.
Leto?
Yes.
Fuller?
Yes.
All right, motion passes. On to item 4, approval of a recommendation to the mayor and the city commission for the appointment of Evangelia Murgia to the NFP review board. Nolan, can you provide some background on this?
Yeah, so back at the May meeting, there were 3 volunteer NFP board members to help search for a replacement candidate for Director Glasser, specifically looking for someone with the expertise in the same area. So geology, hydrogeology, which is an important, A, we need that expertise on the board according to the bylaws, and then B, because slopes are such a prominent natural feature with many of the sites, having that expertise really helps interpret and guide folks through this NFP process. So we started outreach for board members back in March, and because of how specialized that field is, it took a little while to find a candidate that would apply and be interested. We had 2 applications. One person was more in the ecology, sort of arborist backgrounds, which we kind of have full right now with the board as it stands. So we'll hold that on file. And then the NFP nominating subcommittee actually met with the applicant, Ms. Murgia, to talk about their background, their interests in NFP. So I'd open it up to members of that nominating subcommittee if they have any comments they'd like to share.
Yeah, I was on that subcommittee and just reviewing the applicant's CV and resume. It was clear they were a perfect fit for that spot. And then when we did the interview, also clearly a perfect fit. So I look forward to having you join us.
Ditto.
Great. Yeah, I wasn't involved in the interviews, but the resume looks great. So yeah, seems like a good fit.
Agreed.
All right. Can I entertain a motion to approve a recommendation to the mayor and the city commission for the appointment of Evangelia Murgia to the NFP review board?
So moved.
Support.
All right. Nolan, could we get a roll call?
Fuller,
Yes.
Leto,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Bassett.
Yes.
All right. Motion passes.
And I just wanted to give a shout out to Director Glasser, who was one of the original NFP board members, and I think has done a really good job of helping balance the board out in terms of being able to speak to not only impacts to slopes but the hydrogeological factors. So potential stormwater considerations running off into some water bodies for projects, and I think they did a very good job of asking those tougher questions. So just wanted to give a shout out to Director Glasser. I know he's not here, but
Yeah, I'd agree with that. For sure. All right, on to item G, unfinished business. There is none. So item H, staff reports and updates. Nolan, can you provide an update on NFB Phase 3?
yeah, real short. So back at that May meeting, we also had some volunteer board members, thankfully, that have interest in Phase 3 of NFP and what that could be. And recently we met and discussed a couple topics. So it's been brought up at previous board meetings, but still looking at developing an NFP guide, not just for developers, but for residents to look at as well. Still tracking NFP projects, and being able to do some type of annual reporting at the end of the year, or close to the end of the year, maybe the beginning of the following year, as well as thinking about potential items like doing some research on permitting and other aspects on enhancing NFP. Haven't, I think, taken a deep dive yet into the community stewardship, but I think part of that is maybe the guide as well. So how can that be a resource that can make more people aware of what NFP is and isn't, and how it helps guide projects balancing that development and preservation of natural features and their impacts. One aspect I wanted to bring up as well as part of this report is that as the city pursues its update to its master plan, which is IK 2025, we're going to be launching, IK 2035 process pretty soon. There will be a call for an NFP board member to be a part of that process and report back to the board on, what's going on with the master plan process, how you're contributing, but just an FYI. And I'll open it up to any board members who are on that subcommittee if they want to add anything to that.
No, I think you had a really great compilation of information at that meeting. It's pretty clear you've been working a lot on it, and I think it led to some great discussion, and I'm excited to see where things go in the future. All right. Item H, communications and announcements. Any communications or announcements from the NFP board members or city staff? All right, looks like none. We are adjourned.